How do you build a relationship with someone you don't like?
There are other people that just kind of rub you the wrong way. For whatever reason, you just don't get along with them.
Did that mean things were perfect for me? No.
Anytime someone tells us that someone else has a giant ego, we can know for certain that it isn't just that other person.
Our topic for this week is relationships, and we've done several topics on this idea of relationships. It's the first law of combat that we teach because we know you can't get anything done. You cannot solve problems without really strong relationships, up, down, and across the chain of command. But for this episode, we want to focus on one of the questions we get most often, the challenges with relationships, and that is, how do you build a relationship with someone you don't like?
You're not going to get along with everybody. That's the reality. As human beings, there are people that you immediately connect with, that you see eye to eye with, that you might have something in common with. And there are other people that just kind of rub you the wrong way. For whatever reason, you just don't get along with them. We call that a personality conflict. You can call it whatever you want. But either way, you're going to have to work with people like that. And you're going to have to figure out a way to build effective relationships with them so that you can work together, mutually supporting one another in order to accomplish the mission and win.
Yeah, and it's the thing to keep the focus on here. And this is what we hear the most when this question comes up. And I don't know that I've ever spent time with a company where this question has not come up in some way, shape, or form, where it's, hey, well, yeah, I get it, but this person over here, they're really caustic. They have a huge ego. They're impossible to work with, all of these different descriptors to describe that person. And let's be honest, there's probably some truth to what they're saying. But in order to start building that relationship, we have to keep in mind that there's always two sets of egos involved in any conflict like this. That person probably does have an ego, but the reason that this is so hard for this other individual to deal with is because they have an ego as well. And in those interactions with this other person, their ego has probably gotten damaged and they don't like that experience. So now they put this barrier between them, this silo between them of, hey, it's impossible to work with this person. So the first step for me is always just trying to realize that in any conflict, there's two sets of egos at work, and one of those is my own.
Yeah, Corey said once, one of our other leadership instructors, and I know this is a common phrase, but when she said it, I thought, I've never heard this before. And she's like, listen, you can't have a clash of egos when there's only one ego. The clash comes from, I am letting my ego also be involved in this conversation. So part of building that relationship is putting our ego in check. And I think the question people should be asking themselves is, in what way do you benefit ever from having a frictional relationship with someone? And the answer to that is never. Never. You are never going to solve a problem, or in no way is it going to benefit you to have a negative relationship with someone, especially when we're talking about relationships in your organization, your company, that you need to have in order to accomplish whatever mission you're trying to solve together. These are people you're working with every day. You can't get away from them. And so what benefit does it have to have friction between you and that other person? How do we then start moving towards building a relationship, even when we don't necessarily get along? Maybe we have two different personality types. Maybe we've had friction in the past. What are the steps and the tactical things we can do to build that relationship?
The first thing that we just talked about was removing that ego. And I lived this for a couple of years when I was in the Navy. I had a boss who was my direct report. So I worked for this individual every day for 2 years. And I could not stand this person. They were basically all the things that I didn't like about certain leaders in the military. Big ego, can never admit when they were wrong. They led by their rank, if that makes sense. So, hey, do this because I told you to do it. I outrank you. They were kind of a politician in a certain way where they would speak very differently to people higher ranking than them than they would people lower ranking than them. And it was just a very difficult process to try to get along with this person. There was no trust there. If there was ever a mistake or the perception of a mistake, they jumped to a bunch of conclusions and pointed the finger. And my first reaction with this individual was, I just wanted to minimize my contact with him. I wanted nothing to do with him. Let me just avoid him. And what I realized was, that was really immature, and it was going to be very detrimental to my ability as a leader to get the job done, to accomplish what we needed to accomplish. So I made it my job to try to build a relationship with this person. And the first step for me absolutely was realizing that I had to stay detached from my ego, because anytime I went and talked with this person, it was probably going to result in a bruised ego if I allowed it to result in a bruised ego. And over the course of time, over the course of our 2 years together, we were able to build a really good working relationship. And what I mean by working relationship is this person will never come over to my house. This person will never know my address. And if I saw this person today, I would probably even try to like duck away real quick to make sure they didn't see me. But at that time, at that job, we got along pretty well. And we were able to get a lot of stuff done together. Now, did that mean things were perfect for me? No. There were still some times where I got blamed for things that we didn't do, or that, we come up with a great plan and he would change everything because he wanted to do it his way. But those incidences became less and less and less. And we did start to build this foundation of trust for me, to the point of where when it was a choice for him on who to send on this particular operation, he chose us. And it wasn't because we were better than the other platoons. It was because he had more trust in us. And I think the only reason he had more trust in us was because of that relationship that we were able to build out. But I'll be the first to say it wasn't enjoyable and it wasn't easy, but it made everything better, not just for me, but for my team as well.
And that's what you really got to think about. It's one of the biggest lessons that Jocko taught me. When we started working together in Tasking and Bruiser, I kind of prided myself in being, this officer that hated officers more than any of the enlisted guys. And, that I was just disparaging the chain of command, what we call drinking the haterade in the SEAL teams. And I was probably the chief haterade drinker in Tasking and Bruiser, just talking about how our chain of command, they're out here trying to help the enemy, and they're scrutinizing us and are asking us questions. And, 2 or 3 levels up the chain, they don't even know what's going on down here. And they don't get what we're doing. They need to just get out of our way and let us do our job. All that kind of attitude. And Jocko just asked me, like, hey, does that help you? Does it help you to not have a good relationship with your chain of command? And as I thought about that question, it was like, no, it definitely doesn't help me. It doesn't help me as an individual, but worse than that, it actually hurts my team. It doesn't, not only it hurts me, it hurts my team, because we're certainly not going to get approval of plans in a timely manner. We're not going to be chosen as like the unit that gets chosen to go do some mission that we want to do. We're not going to get the accolades that, that we should get for the work that we're doing. We're not going to get the resources that we need, to accomplish our job. It actually really hurts my team to not have a good relationship with my chain of command. So I realized I had to build a good relationship with my chain of command. And my chain of command, they were great people. They approved all of our operations. They gave us all the resources that we needed. I had an awesome chain of command, and I simply had to put the haterade down and stop blaming them for asking me questions and start taking ownership of leading up the chain, of pushing information up the chain, giving them answers to the questions they need, giving them the information that they needed, seeing the world from their perspective, understanding the risks they were concerned about, and explaining the steps that we were taking to mitigate that risk. Once I did all that, a lot of the questions and scrutiny just went away, and we had a great relationship going forward. So that's what you have to do. And we see this so often, because how many times have we worked with companies where leaders will come up to us and say, well, you don't understand how bad this other person is. You don't understand, whether it's a peer that they have to work alongside, whether it's a customer that they're dealing with, that's a huge pain, for them and their team, or whether it's their chain of command, someone, their immediate boss or their boss's boss, or somewhere in the chain of command they're frustrated with. And a lot of times you'll get someone like that just keeps going on and on and on about how terrible this other person is. And sometimes you have to get to a point where you have to say, hey, do you have the ability to fire that person? And obviously if it's someone up the chain of command or a different department, they have no ability over that. So you say, all right, well, you have 2 choices here. You can either go look for a new job, or you can figure out how to build an effective relationship with that person. And all it takes is simply putting your ego in check. And most of the time, what drives a wedge between our relationships is assigning sinister intent to someone. If I'm working on a project and Jamie's working on another part of the project, and I got my part of the project done and she didn't get hers done. I'm like, well, Jamie just can't get it done. I assigned sinister intent instead of, hey, maybe Jamie's a great person and she's working really hard, but maybe her part of the project is actually harder than mine. Maybe there's something going on that where she needs more resources that I can give her. What can I do to actually help Jamie? Instead of just pointing fingers at her and saying that she's not doing her job and, assigning the sinister intent. Because if I'm going to assign sinister intent to people, I'm never going to be able to build a better relationship.
And if we do this effort to try and build a relationship, sometimes we might be surprised. We might recognize that our assumption about somebody or their personality or who they are is wrong. We have a client who has many plants across the US, and every month, each plant gets the inspector. And the inspector goes to all the different plants every single month. His job is to go to each plant and inspect and write them up for various infractions. And we were working with this one particular plant who just had this very negative, contentious relationship with the inspector. And every time he came, it was friction. And part of the effort that we guided this team on is, hey, you have to build a good relationship. This is something that is going to happen. You're not going to get away from this. So what can you do to build a good relationship with this guy? And that leadership team took that assignment and they did just that. The next time he came, they showed up, they were prepared for him. They had brought in lunch that day and invited him to lunch, but they had never done before. And when they got the list of infractions, they accepted that with a positive attitude and said, awesome, we're going to make sure we get these dialed in. So next time you come, we've got this locked in and you can have trust that we're going to follow up on this. And they started just taking ownership and doing subtle little things to build a relationship with this inspector. And over the course of a couple months, they would report back and say, man, our relationship with him has gotten so much better. And what I realized as I built a relationship with him, and this is one leader telling this to us, was that I realized what a hard job he had. Because the entirety of his job was going into various plants and telling people what they were doing wrong, which nobody likes to hear. And I realized that part of his attitude or the way that he engaged with us coming and doing these things was based on all of the negativity he was feeling on a day-to-day basis. And the way that we took ownership of that was just finding ways to make his job easier so that when he came to our plant, he wanted to be there. And it didn't mean that he let those infractions slide or let us be unsafe, but he started collaborating with us more. He started giving us a little bit more of a heads up when he was going to be there, and we could sit and talk and we could find some common ground or compromises in various things or create some better timelines for getting some of these things done because he now had an opportunity to hear from us on some of the other priorities we had. All of a sudden, he realized that he didn't really know this person at all. And all the assumptions he had made were wrong. And he was very surprised to find that they had a lot in common. And actually, while he didn't love having the inspector come down every month and tell them what they were doing wrong, he actually really enjoyed this person and they were able to have a good relationship that led towards the outcome of what they were trying to achieve.
I learned that lesson in college. I went to the U.S. Naval Academy and I got assigned a professor in calculus, and this professor had a reputation of being someone that you did not want to be in the class with. So people are like, oh my goodness, you got him. That's terrible. And I'm like, I started asking and, he'll throw you out of class for clicking your mechanical pencil, more than like twice in a row.
Oh, I would have been thrown out every class.
This was, he didn't mess around and he was very matter of fact. And he didn't put up with any kind of shenanigans. If you ask too many questions, he might kick you out of class. And so I thought, man, this is going to be terrible. I had all that in mind, right? I have this idea that this person's going to be terrible and it's going to be a tough thing for me. And I found that initially I got in some trouble in the class. I think I got thrown out of class for kicking my pencil or maybe talking to my neighbor or, something just briefly, some brief exchange of like, hey, how you doing? And tossed out of class, which seemed like totally unreasonable. But I realized he had office hours where you could go get some extra instruction. And I realized I needed some extra instruction in that class because it was a challenging class. And I went and spent some time with him in his office and he we formed a good relationship. And he recognized that I was trying to learn, that I was interested in being better. And we ended up having a great relationship. And I thought he was a great professor. And I got along great with him, even though other people thought that he was mean and he was unreasonable and this is not the profession he wanted. I thought he was great. I learned a ton from him. And I ended up having a great relationship with him as a result.
I literally just gave my son that same feedback. I encourage him to go and advocate for himself, to get to know his teachers, to take advantage of the office hours after school. There's about a half an hour period before sports start that you can go and talk to your teachers and get feedback or ask questions. And I regularly will encourage him to go and do that. And I recently talked to him about, hey, the teachers you need to prioritize in that effort are the teachers that you struggle the most with. Whether you feel like, oh, they don't like me, or you struggle the most in those classes, those are the teachers you need to go spend your time with. That's where you need to put your effort. Because the teachers who like you, they're already going to be much more inclined to help you and give you a little bit of leeway here or there, or help you out. The teachers that you don't know as well, or maybe there's a little bit of friction there because, he's a knucklehead 16-year-old. And those are the teachers that when you go and build a relationship, when you need help, when you get to that point where you need help, you now have some level base of a relationship to go in and say, hey, I got a bad grade on this quiz. Is there anything I can do? Or what can I do next time to better prepare myself? And they're going to be a little more inclined to help and support you. But you can't go into that conversation if you've done nothing up until that point to build that relationship. It's not going to work.
So we know that we need to. We know that we've got these different frictional relationships or personality conflicts, and we know that we need to build a relationship. We understand that that's the right thing to do, but where do we start? What do we need to do at a tactical level to start building that relationship, maybe with someone where there's already a history there where we just don't like each other, or where we've had, run-ins in the past that maybe our egos have let escalate to, conflict. How do I start to prepare that relationship?
It starts by, number one, checking your ego. You have to check your ego. If you and I have had a conflict, I got to put my ego in check. And just as we said before, right? It takes two egos to clash. And we get those people who are like, this person has a giant ego. Anytime someone tells us that someone else has a giant ego, we can know for certain that it isn't just that other person. Because if I don't have an ego, but you have a huge ego, we can get along great. I can subordinate my ego. We can work together. Everything's good. And we've had so many different examples of leaders who had huge clashes with each other. One example that I remember well was two leaders that were having a significant clash, so much so that each of them individually went into the CEO's office and said, I can't work with this other person, they need to be fired.
How'd that work out for them?
It was a terrible situation. One of the leaders came to me and said, hey, I'm struggling with this. I don't like this person. We're not getting along. This person is undermining me, to the CEO. It's causing all kinds of problems. And I talked to him about how did it help him to not have a good relationship with this person. He realized it did not. I said, all right, you need to go build a better relationship with him. Why don't you go take him out to lunch? You guys can start to, take him out to coffee, do something where you can start to build a relationship. And so we went into his office and said, hey, let's go out to lunch. And the guy said, get the heck out of here. I don't have time for you. And so he called me. He's like, I tried. And he said, get out of my office. And I said, well, what do you think he's thinking right now? And so we kind of thought through that. We talked through it. And it became pretty clear that what he's thinking, when he came into his office and said, hey, let's go out to lunch. I'd like to talk to you about some stuff. That guy's thinking, oh, you're going to tell me how screwed up I am and how messed up my department is and, how I just need to, do better and fix myself. He didn't want to hear any of that stuff. I said, well, let's start with ownership. Let's start with ownership. And we even role played that scenario a couple of times where he, and he took that role play, went into that guy's office and said, listen, I know we've been having a clash. There's a lot of things that my department could do better to support your department. I know that we've been butting some heads. That's my fault. I need to do a better job of building a better relationship with you. And I'd love to take you out to lunch and learn how we could better support you and your department. And that leader was like, sure, let's do it. And they went out and they started to build a relationship. And it got to a point where they were meeting weekly. Every week they would have a lunch meeting to talk about things and align with things. I don't think they ever became, best friends and beer drinking buddies. They probably never invited each other to barbecues on the weekends, but none of that mattered. They did have an effective relationship, and they were able to work together, mutually support one another, and more importantly, their departments were able to work together and mutually support one another, which enabled the team to be successful. And all it took was for one individual to check their ego, subordinate their ego, take ownership, and to start that process.
And one of the things you pointed out there was you can only control one part of that equation, and that's your own actions. So him taking ownership, him going and building that bridge to try to repair that relationship, obviously worked out. If he would have just focused on that other person and like, well, they're not doing this, and he hasn't reached out with the olive branch, then that situation would not have gotten any better. And it might have ended with both of those individuals getting removed from their position for not being able to work and support with each other. So,
which would be the exact scenario we wrote about in Extreme Ownership.
That's right. That's right. And we talked about the ladder of alignment on a previous episode. And for me, in my experience with my boss that I didn't really like and didn't see eye to eye with, I had to really climb that ladder of alignment pretty high before I realized, well, what do we both want? We both want our unit to be successful. We both want to go overseas and do good things for the country and bring our guys back home safe. So starting with that understanding allowed me to detach further from my ego and realize, okay, well, if that's the desired end state, we're both in alignment. And everything else underneath that, now we can start to build upon that. So we want the unit to look good. We want the unit to be prepared. How can I best support him in his decision-making to make that happen? And usually what happens when I show someone else respect and I support someone else's plan and I show someone else that I trust them is that behavior starts to get reciprocated. And now all of a sudden we've got this foundation of a relationship starting to form between us.
Yeah, you're hinting at the framework we teach for how to build an effective relationship: trust, listen, respect, influence, and care. And I think when we're dealing, that's the framework for building any relationship. But when we're dealing with someone we don't get along with or we don't like, I would focus my effort on that respect component. And too often people have this assumption that that person needs to earn my respect. And we need to go into relationships thinking, I am going to offer my respect. It doesn't have to be earned. I'm going to show you respect. And the more that we can do that, the more that we show someone respect, the more likely it is that they're willing to reciprocate that. Same with all the other things that we teach. The reciprocal nature of showing someone you trust them builds trust. Showing someone that you're willing to listen to them and listen to their perspective makes them more willing to listen to you. Allowing people to influence you gives you a better opportunity if you need to down the road to influence them. And that respect component. I'm going to show you respect. And if I do that properly and I do that sincerely, I have a higher likelihood of gaining some of your respect in return. And I think the underlying piece of this framework that we teach is care. And this is the part when you have someone you don't necessarily like, and we're saying, hey, all of these things are predicated first that you care about this person. And to be clear, you can care about this person because you recognize that they're a piece to the bigger puzzle and helping us to accomplish the mission. And so your care for this person is, yes, I care about this person that they succeed because their success is going to lead to our success. And I care about this person because they add value to our mission. And if you can align on that piece of it, then you can find some ways to get over some of the small things that rub you the wrong way or create friction or just create a little disconnect because they're not your type of person. And we can set all of those aside to recognize that we can work together. I care about you. I care about your success within this organization. Here's what I'm going to do to set my ego aside so we can build that relationship.
In the SEAL teams, we used to kind of have this running joke amongst this small group of friends of mine that nobody was tougher or like more arrogant than a team guy that doesn't know you, right? Team guy is a word we use for SEALs. And, let's say Sean and I never worked together in the SEAL teams. And we didn't know each other. Sean may be like a 3-time Medal of Honor recipient, who's got more combat than anybody in the universe. But if I don't know him, we sit down next to each other. I'm like, who's this dude? Oh, he thinks he's all that. What's up? I'm like checking him out, kind of eyeballing him. And this becomes like this friction point when you're like, it's almost laughable because you can see this, this happen. And oftentimes you see it amongst the veteran community as well. And we'll go work with leaders. And sometimes I will you feel kind of this certain attitude from a particular veteran that you're meeting where you're like, well, that guy seems to kind of have an attitude toward me, or that guy just kind of seems to think like, real standoffish and kind of like, seems arrogant or like real kind of demeaning toward you or kind of scoffing at things that you're saying. I've experienced this a handful of times. And what's interesting, if you go up and talk to that person and you're like, hey man, what's going on? Did you serve? Like, oh, you're in the Marine Corps? That's awesome, man. I love the Marine Corps. We serve with an incredible group of Marines in Ramadi, and the entire attitude completely changes. And what's interesting is oftentimes that person will just tell you straight up like, oh, I thought that you would be arrogant, like some other SEALs that I've met. I thought that you would look down on Marines and you think you would know better than Marines. And it's the same thing for the soldiers that we worked alongside. They're the same exact experience. Like, oh, that's awesome. And you served in the Army. I had a tremendous working relationship with the soldiers we served alongside. One of the proudest moments for me was in Ramadi in 2006 when the Army units that we were working with called us their Army SEALs. We took tremendous pride in that. I loved working alongside those tankers and infantrymen and artillerymen. They were outstanding. And my hat's off to you, and that's an awesome job. By the way, all those things are true. I'm not just trying to blow smoke. I had tremendous admiration for the soldiers and Marines that we served alongside and how the just courageous warriors that they were. I wouldn't even be sitting here today if it wasn't for them coming and bailing us out over and over again and risking their lives to actually rescue us. Some people will assume that you feel otherwise. And so they kind of have this defensive posture around them. And so all it takes to break that down is a simple conversation or a simple comment to actually exercise some humility, subordinate my ego, show them the respect that you're talking about. I have tremendous respect for these soldiers and Marines that we worked with. You show them some respect and all of a sudden they show you respect. And it seems like it's an impossible thing. Well, this person, obviously has some issue with me. How can I control that? But you have all the control in the world because their perception of you is based on your actions. You control your actions, and that's all you have to do is be humble, take ownership, show other people respect, show them that you care about them, and it makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, I had a tough conversation with a friend who was going through some rocky points in their marriage. And over the course of a bunch of different dialogues, it came out that he told me one time, like, she just doesn't respect me. And I think that was where a lot of his issues were coming from. And I looked at him and I asked him a very hard question, which was, are you a husband that's worthy of her respect? Do you put her needs before your own? Are you making good decisions for the family? Are you devoting your time to the family? Are you treating her with respect? Are you honoring her like you should your spouse? And the answer to a lot of those things was no, he was not. He had allowed the little friction that they had to build into something to where he had basically stopped being someone that was worthy of her to respect. So the first step for him was he needed to go to her and take ownership of that and patch that up. And that foundation of respect and trust is really the foundation for a true relationship.
And that's exactly what leaders need to do if they want to build relationships, particularly with people they may not like or get along with. So the immediate action drill for this week is to identify a frictional relationship in your life right now, and then anchor yourself in extreme ownership and write down some practical things you can do to start repairing that relationship with the knowledge that you need to have good relationships in order to accomplish the mission.
Maybe that's a family member. Maybe it's a neighbor. Maybe it's someone in your community. Maybe it's someone at your kid's school. Maybe it's someone that you work with, up, down, across the chain of command. Whoever you least want to write down as the person you need to build a better relationship, that's the person that you need to focus on. And all it takes is subordinating your ego, showing them some respect, and you can build an effective relationship with that person. So go out there and build better relationships. And when you do, you can lead and win.
Find us on YouTube or wherever you like to listen to podcasts and do all the things you're supposed to do. Like, subscribe, share, leave us a review, but most importantly, send us the leadership challenges that you're facing right now so we can target our next episodes to helping you understand how to apply the principles of extreme ownership to solving those challenges.
Check out our free resources at echelonfront.com, or you can take the next step and join the Extreme Ownership Academy, our online training platform, where we go deeper on these principles and teach you how to apply them in your business and in your life.